The blue-skinned alien pressed his webbed fingers against the glowing control panel. Ambassador Oran studied the star charts floating before him in the command center of his diplomatic ship. His large black eyes reflected the soft light as he examined the third planet from the yellow star. "Such a primitive species," he said to his aide, a tall creature with 4 arms. "Look at their radio signals, so weak and simple." The aide nodded, his extra arms moving to adjust different controls. The Hegemony Council was right to classify them as Category 3 developing. They barely understand nuclear fusion. For 60 years, the 12 species of the Hegemony had watched this small blue world. Their hidden sensors detected every radio broadcast, every rocket launch, every nuclear test. The humans seemed aggressive but harmless. They fought among themselves with crude weapons and struggled to reach their own moon. Oran swam through the water-filled corridors of his ship toward the main planning room. As a member of the aquatic race, he needed water to breathe properly. The other species in his crew used breathing masks when they joined him in the flooded sections. "Begin the standard integration protocol," he ordered his communications officer, an insect-like being with multiple eyes. "These humans will be grateful for our guidance." The Hegemony had performed this same process hundreds of times before. They would approach a young species with offers of technology and protection. In return, the new species would provide resources and accept certain limits on their development. It prevented dangerous weapons from being created and kept peace in the galaxy. "Sir, should we demonstrate our power first?" asked his tactical officer, a reptilian creature covered in green scales. "Some species respond better to shows of force." Oran considered this. The humans did seem unusually violent compared to most species the Hegemony encountered. Their history was filled with wars and conflicts, but they were so far behind in technology that force seemed unnecessary. "No, we will begin with peaceful contact," he decided. "Our ships alone should be impressive enough. They have never seen antimatter drives or energy shields." 3 ships made up Oran's diplomatic fleet. Each one was beautiful, made of crystalline materials that caught and reflected light. They moved silently through space, powered by reactions that could destroy entire cities if released improperly. To the humans, they would seem like magic. The lead ship, Harmony's Voice, was Oran's flagship. It carried the most advanced translation computers and communication systems in the galaxy. The other 2 ships, Peaceful Dawn and Guiding Light, were equipped with defensive shields and light weapons. Nothing that could truly threaten a planet, just enough to deal with any primitive spacecraft the humans might send. "Sir, we are approaching the outer edge of their solar system," reported his navigator. "Should we activate the diplomatic beacons?" "Yes, begin broadcasting on all frequencies," Oran replied. "Use the standard mathematical sequences first. Even primitive minds can understand basic numbers." The 3 ships positioned themselves near the humans' 4th planet, the red one they called Mars. From there, they could observe Earth while staying at a safe distance. The Hegemony protocols required careful first contact procedures to avoid frightening new species. Oran watched the scanning displays with satisfaction. Earth's orbital space contained a few simple satellites and space stations. Some nuclear missiles were hidden in underground silos, exactly what they expected from a warlike but technologically limited species. The humans had managed to split the atom, but still used chemical rockets to escape their planet's gravity. "Their reaction is interesting," noted his sensor operator, studying the increasing radio traffic from Earth. "They seem excited but cautious." "Good," Oran said. "Fear and excitement make species more willing to accept guidance. They understand they have encountered something beyond their current abilities." The mathematical broadcasts continued for several days. The humans responded with their own mathematical sequences, proving they understood the messages. Slowly, the communications became more complex. Pictures, simple concepts, basic language structure. Oran felt pleased with the progress. This was proceeding exactly like dozens of previous first contacts. The humans were responding predictably, showing curiosity mixed with appropriate caution. Soon they would be ready for direct communication. "Sir, we are receiving a concentrated transmission from Earth," his communications officer announced. "They appear to have organized some kind of central response authority." "Excellent," Oran replied. "This saves us from dealing with multiple primitive governments. Display the message." The main screen showed symbols in various human languages, but the translation computers quickly converted them to galactic standard. The message was simple. "We are the United Earth Contact Committee. We wish to communicate with you in peace." Oran smiled, his gills fluttering with satisfaction. The humans had done exactly what the hegemony predicted. They had united their governments and chosen diplomatic contact over aggression. This would make integration much easier. "Begin preparing the benevolent integration proposal," he ordered his staff. "Standard terms technology sharing in exchange for resource rights and population controls. Include the protection clause and development limitations." His aide asked, "Should we mention the enforcement capabilities, sir?" "Not yet," Oran replied. "Let them see our generous offer first. Most species accept willingly when they understand the benefits. We only need to demonstrate our military superiority if they prove stubborn." The ships continued their orbit near Mars, while the diplomatic computers prepared the formal contact documents. Oran reviewed the standard integration terms with satisfaction. Humanity would receive basic space travel technology, some medical advances, and energy production improvements. In return, they would allow hegemony mining operations in their asteroid belt and outer planet moons. They would also accept population limits to prevent resource depletion and agree not to develop certain dangerous technologies without hegemony approval. It was a fair arrangement, in Oran's opinion. Humanity would benefit greatly from joining galactic civilization, even as junior members. They would be protected from the dangers of uncontrolled development and potential conflicts with other species. "Sir, Earth is requesting more time to prepare for direct communication," reported the communications officer. "Grant them 3 days," Oran decided. "Primitive species often need time to overcome their initial fear. Soon they will understand how fortunate they are to receive our attention." He dismissed his staff and returned to his private chambers to review the intelligence files on humanity one more time. Everything indicated this would be a routine integration. The humans were exactly what they appeared to be: a young, violent species with limited technology and no real understanding of the greater galaxy. Soon they would learn their proper place in the cosmic order. Admiral Sarah stood in the war room deep beneath the Pentagon, watching dozens of screens display information about the alien ships. Her hair was pulled back tightly, and her sharp blue eyes missed nothing as data flowed across the monitors. 3 days had passed since the aliens first made contact, and Earth's governments were still trying to understand what they faced. "Status report," she ordered her aide, Colonel Martinez. "The alien ships remain in position near Mars, ma'am," Martinez replied, consulting his tablet. "No hostile movements detected. They continue broadcasting what our linguists believe are peaceful intentions." Nodded but kept her expression neutral. Around the table sat representatives from every major nation on Earth, all part of the hastily formed United Earth Contact Committee. Secretary General led the civilian diplomatic team while handled military concerns. "Admiral, what's your assessment of their technology?" asked Dr. James, Earth's leading. "Advanced," replied simply. "Our sensors detect energy outputs far beyond anything we currently use. Their ships appear to be made of unknown crystalline materials. No visible propulsion systems, yet they move with perfect precision." "Could we defend ourselves if necessary?" asked quietly. Was silent for a moment. "With conventional weapons? No. Their energy shields alone seem capable of stopping our most powerful missiles." This sobered the room. Everyone understood the implications. If these aliens had hostile intentions, Earth's military forces would be almost helpless to stop them. "We need to focus on peaceful solutions," said firmly. "Doctor, how are the language translations progressing?" Dr. Susan, Earth's top linguist, looked up from her computer. "Very well, actually. Their translation matrix is incredibly sophisticated. We can now communicate in basic concepts. They've requested a formal diplomatic meeting." "What kind of meeting?" asked. "Direct communication between their ambassador and our representatives," replied. "They say they have an important proposal for humanity." Looked around the table. "Admiral, what are your thoughts?" Considered carefully. "We should hear what they have to say, but we should also be prepared for any possibility." "Meaning what?" asked the British representative. "Meaning we activate all defensive protocols while maintaining a diplomatic front," replied. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Nodded, very well. Doctor, tell them we accept their request for a formal meeting. Schedule it for tomorrow at noon Eastern Time. The meeting took place via quantum communication link. The main screen in the war room flickered to life, showing the interior of an alien ship. The ambassador appeared, a blue-skinned humanoid with large black eyes and visible gills. He wore no clothing, but had various technological devices attached to his skin. "Greetings, people of Earth," the ambassador said through the translation system. His voice sounded strange but understandable. "I am Ambassador Oran of the Hegemony. We represent 12 species united in peaceful cooperation." "Welcome, Ambassador," replied diplomatically. "I am Secretary General of the United Earth Contact Committee. We are honored by your visit." "Thank you," Oran said. "We have observed your species for many years. You show great potential but also concerning aggressive tendencies. We are here to offer you guidance and protection." Admiral felt something cold settle in her stomach at those words. Guidance and protection usually meant control in her experience. "What kind of guidance?" asked carefully. Oran smiled, showing sharp teeth. "We offer membership in galactic civilization. You would receive advanced technologies, clean energy, space travel, medical improvements. In return, you would accept certain necessary limitations." "What limitations?" Doctor asked. "Population controls to prevent resource depletion," Oran explained. "Restrictions on dangerous technology development. And of course, we would need mining rights to your asteroid belt and outer planets to help fund your integration." The room fell silent. Watched face carefully and saw the same concern she felt. This wasn't an offer of partnership, it was a demand for surrender disguised as diplomacy. "We would need time to consider such a significant proposal," said diplomatically. "Of course," Oran replied. "We understand this is overwhelming for a young species. However, we must stress that joining the hegemony is not optional for species in our region of space. The galaxy is dangerous. You need our protection." There it was, thought, the threat beneath the friendly words. "What happens if we decline?" asked directly. Oran's expression became serious. "We would be forced to implement protective intervention measures. For your own safety, of course. Unguided species often destroy themselves with dangerous technologies or attract hostile attention from less civilized beings." After the communication ended, the room erupted in angry voices. Representatives argued about the aliens' true intentions, while scientists debated their technological capabilities. "This is conquest wrapped in diplomatic language," declared the Russian representative. "We can't fight them," argued the Japanese delegate. "Their technology is too advanced." Admiral stood up, silencing the room. "Secretary General, I request permission to implement Protocol 7. Paused. Protocol 7 was Earth's most classified defense plan, known only to a few dozen people in the entire world. "Are you certain that's necessary, Admiral?" asked quietly. "Ma'am, they just threatened us with conquest if we don't surrender voluntarily," replied. "They're giving us the illusion of choice while making it clear there is no choice. Protocol 7 exists for exactly this situation." "What's Protocol 7? asked the German representative. And exchanged glances. "Classified," said simply. "Admiral, you have my authorization." Activated her secure communicator. "This is Admiral Authorization Code Alpha 77. Initiate Protocol 7 immediately. Signal all Titan-class assets. We may need them soon." The message went out on frequencies most humans didn't know existed, traveling to receivers hidden in the deepest parts of space. Far beyond the orbit of Pluto, automated systems began powering up for the first time in decades. "Ambassador Oran is requesting another meeting," Doctor announced. "He says they need our answer within 72 hours. "Tell him we're still consulting with our defense advisors," replied. "Defense advisors?" asked confused. Admiral smiled grimly. "Tell him Earth's defensive capabilities need to be considered before we make such an important decision." As the message was transmitted, hoped she was making the right choice. Protocol 7 had never been used before. It was humanity's ultimate secret, developed over decades in complete secrecy. If it worked, the balance of power might shift dramatically. If it didn't work, Earth would face the consequences of defying beings far more powerful than themselves. but had spent her entire career preparing for impossible situations. She wasn't ready to surrender humanity's freedom without a fight, even against impossible odds. The next 72 hours would determine the future of the human species. 3 weeks passed in tense negotiations. Ambassador Oran found himself growing increasingly frustrated with the stubborn humans. Most species accepted hegemony protection within days of first contact. These humans kept asking questions, demanding details, and requesting more time to consider. "They are stalling," his tactical officer observed, his reptilian features showing clear annoyance. "Perhaps we should demonstrate our superior capabilities." Oran swam through his command chamber, considering the suggestion. The humans had formed some kind of global government just to talk with the hegemony, which showed they understood the importance of the situation. But they seemed reluctant to accept the obvious benefits of joining galactic civilization. "Activate minor defensive demonstrations," he ordered finally. "Nothing threatening, just enough to help them understand reality." The 3 hegemony ships moved closer to Earth, their crystalline hulls reflecting sunlight as they approached. Energy shields flickered to life around them, visible as shimmering distortions in space. The ships extended beam projectors and began targeting small asteroids in Earth's vicinity, vaporizing them completely with brief pulses of coherent energy. On Earth, Admiral watched the demonstration from her command center. Her staff tracked every movement, every energy discharge, every tactical maneuver the alien ships performed. "They're showing off," Colonel Martinez observed. "Those asteroid destructions serve no practical purpose except intimidation." "Noted," replied calmly. "Any change in their shield configurations?" "Yes, ma'am. They're running at approximately 60% power, definitely trying to impress rather than actually defend themselves." Nodded. The aliens were being careful not to appear too threatening while still making their point clear. It was classic diplomatic intimidation, show enough force to prove superiority without provoking desperate resistance. Her secure communicator chimed softly. A message appeared on the encrypted display. "Protocol 7 assets responding, ETA 36 hours. Felt a cold satisfaction settle in her chest. For decades, Earth's governments had prepared for this exact scenario. Not just alien contact, but alien threats. The response had been carefully planned by the minds humanity could produce. "Admiral," called her communications officer, "the aliens are requesting another meeting. They say it's urgent." "Put them through," ordered. Ambassador Oran appeared on screen again, but this time his demeanor seemed less patient. His gills fluttered more rapidly, and his large black eyes showed what humans might recognize as frustration. "Secretary General," he began without his usual diplomatic pleasantries, "we have been more than patient with your deliberations. The Hegemony Council requires an answer within 72 hours. "We appreciate your patience, Ambassador," replied calmly. "However, such an important decision requires careful consideration of all factors, including Earth's defensive capabilities." Oran paused at that phrase. "Defensive capabilities? You mean your nuclear weapons and orbital platforms? Those would be ineffective against hegemony technology." "Perhaps," said noncommittally, "but we must still consult with our military advisors before making any final decisions." "What military advisors?" Oran asked, his voice showing the first hint of concern. "We have monitored all your military communications. You have no significant space-based forces." Admiral leaned forward slightly. "Ambassador, you've been very thorough in your observations, but perhaps not as thorough as you believe." Something in her tone made Oran's gills flutter nervously. "Explain." "Some of Earth's defensive assets operate on frequencies you may not have detected," said carefully. "We need to consult with all relevant commands before making such an important decision." "Impossible," Oran's tactical officer interrupted from off-screen. "We have monitored this system for decades. There are no significant military assets beyond their primitive orbital installations." Smiled slightly. "Would you like us to provide a demonstration of our defensive capabilities, just so you understand what we're working with?" Oran hesitated. Something about the human's confidence troubled him. Species facing hegemony superiority usually showed fear or desperate bravado. These humans seemed almost prepared. "That won't be necessary," he said finally. You have 72 hours. If you do not accept protection under hegemony law by then, we will be forced to implement protective intervention measures for your own safety." The communication ended, leaving Earth's leaders in their command center. Admiral said quietly, "Are you certain about this course of action?" "Ma'am, they just delivered an ultimatum," replied. "Accept surrender or face invasion. Protocol 7 was designed for exactly this scenario." Activated her quantum communicator and sent a coded signal into deep space. The transmission traveled on frequencies the aliens had never detected, using quantum entanglement principles that bypassed normal space-time communication delays. Far out in the belt, beyond Pluto's orbit, something vast began to stir. Automated systems that had waited in silent hibernation for decades suddenly came online. Massive engines, cold for years, began their startup sequences. Power cores that had remained dormant started generating energy signatures that dwarfed anything in the inner solar system. On Iran's flagship, alarm signals suddenly filled the command center. His sensor operators stared at their displays in confusion and growing alarm. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy spikes from the outer system," his chief sensor operator reported. "Unknown energy signature, approximately 40 astronomical units from the star." "What kind of energy signature?" Iran demanded. "Sir, it's larger than our own ship's power output, by several orders of magnitude." Iran felt cold water flow over his gills as fear began to set in. "Show me." The main display changed to show long-range sensor data. A single bright point of energy was accelerating inward from the edge of the solar system. The power readings made no sense. Nothing that primitive species could build should be able to generate that much energy. "Could it be a natural phenomenon?" he asked desperately. "No, sir," his science officer replied, her 4 arms working frantically at multiple control panels. "The acceleration pattern indicates artificial propulsion. Something is moving toward us at significant velocity while maintaining stable energy output." "How fast?" "Sir, it's moving faster than our ships at maximum speed, and it's accelerating." Iran felt his confidence crumbling. For 60 years, they had observed this system. Their sensors were the most advanced in the galaxy. How could they have missed something generating this much power? "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human leadership," his communications officer announced. "Put it through," Iran ordered, his voice barely steady. Admiral appeared on screen, but her demeanor had changed completely. Gone was the careful diplomacy and polite concern. Her expression was cold and professional, like a military commander addressing an enemy. "Ambassador Iran," she said formally, "you wanted to meet Earth's defensive capabilities. Allow me to introduce the UES Prometheus, our Titan-class Dreadnought. Estimated arrival time at your current position is 34 hours." The transmission ended, leaving Iran staring at a blank screen while his command crew watched their sensors in growing horror. Something enormous was approaching from the dark between worlds, something that shouldn't exist, something that meant everything they thought they knew about humanity was catastrophically wrong. Captain sat in the command chair of the UES Prometheus, watching the tactical displays as her ship decelerated into the inner solar system. Around her, the bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency, their faces calm despite the magnitude of what they were approaching. "Ma'am, we have visual contact with the alien vessels," reported her sensor officer, Lieutenant Commander Park. 3 ships, crystalline design, positioned in high orbit around Mars. "Show me," ordered. The main screen displayed the 3 hegemony ships against the red backdrop of Mars. They looked elegant and advanced, their crystal hulls catching starlight. But compared to the angular bulk of the Prometheus, they seemed almost delicate. Had commanded the Prometheus for 8 years, and her ship bore the marks of battles fought in the dark spaces between stars. Its 27-kilometer hull was covered in weapon arrays and defensive systems that represented humanity's most advanced military technology. Every square meter had been designed for one purpose: winning wars against impossible odds. "Captain," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving multiple transmissions from the alien ships. They're demanding identification and requesting we maintain safe distance." "Standard response, Lieutenant," replied calmly. "Inform them this is United Earth space and they are in violation of territorial boundaries." The Prometheus continued its approach, its massive engines generating thrust patterns that sent ripples through local spacetime. The ship's hull, black as void, and from conflicts the hegemony couldn't even imagine, reflected no light as it moved with impossible grace for something of its size. On Iran's flagship, panic filled the command center. Every sensor array was focused on the approaching vessel, trying to understand what they faced. "Sir, the energy readings are impossible," his tactical officer reported, his reptilian features pale with fear. "That ship's power output exceeds our entire fleet combined, by a factor of 12. "What about weapons?" Iran asked, his gills fluttering rapidly with stress. "Sir, we can't identify half the weapons systems on that vessel. The ones we can recognize appear to use principles of physics we thought only our most advanced species understood, and some technologies we don't recognize at all." Iran stared at the tactical display showing the human ship's approach. It everything he had been taught about technological development. Species didn't jump from chemical rockets to this level of advancement without transitioning through predictable stages. "How did we miss this?" he demanded. "Our sensors have monitored this system for 60 years. His science officer looked up from her control panel, her four arms trembling slightly. "Sir, I'm detecting additional energy signatures throughout the system. Automated defense platforms hiding in asteroid fields. Weapon satellites disguised as communication relays. Sir, this entire system is a fortress." The revelation hit Iran like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't been primitive at all. They had been hiding their true capabilities, letting the hegemony see only what they wanted them to see. "Sir, the human ship is hailing us directly," his communications officer reported. "Put it through," Iran ordered, dreading what he might hear. Captain appeared on screen, and Iran immediately understood he was looking at a career military officer. Her hair was streaked with premature white, her face bore scars from battles, and her eyes held the calm confidence of someone accustomed to facing impossible situations. "This is Captain of the United Earth ship Prometheus," she said in a voice that carried absolute authority. "You are in violation of Earth territorial space. State your intentions or withdraw immediately." Iran tried to regain some diplomatic composure. "Captain, I am Ambassador Iran of the hegemony. We are here on a peaceful diplomatic mission." "Peaceful missions don't typically involve threatening planetary governments with conquest," replied coldly. "Nor do they include demonstrations of weapons against civilian space objects." "We were simply," Iran began. "You delivered an ultimatum to Earth's government," interrupted. "Accept subjugation or face invasion. Those were your exact words, translated from galactic standard." Iran felt his diplomatic training crumble. This human captain spoke his language perfectly and had clearly been monitoring all their communications. "Captain, perhaps there has been a misunderstanding," he tried desperately. "The hegemony offers protection and guidance to developing species. It's for their own benefit." Studied him for a moment. "Ambassador, let me clarify something for you. Humanity doesn't need your protection. We've been protecting ourselves just fine." "From what?" Iran asked, genuinely confused. "This region of space is peaceful. The hegemony has maintained order here for centuries." "This region of space is peaceful because we've been keeping it that way," replied. "The threats you don't see are the ones we've been dealing with for longer than your hegemony has existed." She gestured to someone off-screen, and new data appeared on both ships' displays. Star charts showing the galaxy beyond hegemony space, marked with symbols indicating battles, defensive actions, and areas of ongoing conflict. "What is this?" Iran asked, staring at the impossible data. "These are the war zones, Ambassador. The places where humanity has been fighting to keep things like the Devourers and the Shadow Fleet from reaching inhabited systems. Your hegemony exists in a bubble of safety we've helped maintain." Iran felt his worldview cracking. "Impossible. Our sensors show no signs of major conflicts in those regions." "Because we've contained them," said simply. 12 Titan-class Dreadnoughts have been patrolling the deep void for over a century, facing threats your species can't imagine. The Prometheus just returned from a 3-year deployment in the void reach. The tactical displays on Iran's ship suddenly filled with new contacts. Ships materialized out of what had seemed empty space, their stealth systems disengaging. Hundreds of vessels, from small fighters to massive battle cruisers, appeared throughout the solar system. "My God," his sensor operator whispered. "They've been here all along. The entire system is filled with hidden military assets." Captain continued calmly. "Every radio signal you intercepted was carefully planned. Every nuclear test you observed was staged for your benefit. We've known about your surveillance since the day you started watching us." Oran realized the true scope of his mistake. The hegemony hadn't discovered a primitive species. They had stumbled into contact with something far more advanced and dangerous than themselves. "What do you want from us?" he asked, his voice barely steady. "Right now, an explanation of why you threatened Earth with invasion," replied. "After that, we'll discuss new terms for interaction between our species, terms that recognize Earth as an equal partner, not a subject to be conquered." The Prometheus settled into position between Earth and the hegemony ships, its massive bulk dwarfing the alien vessels. Along its hull, weapon ports began to glow with contained energy, making it clear that any aggressive action would be met with overwhelming force. Oran looked around his command center at his terrified crew, then back at the human captain on his screen. Everything had changed in a matter of hours. The hegemony's entire approach to galactic relations would have to be reconsidered. "Captain," he said finally, "I believe we need to begin new negotiations." The negotiations took place aboard the Prometheus in one of its massive conference rooms. Ambassador, Oran sat across from Secretary General, Admiral, and Captain, feeling more out of place than he ever had in decades of diplomatic service. The room itself was a statement of power. Massive displays showed real-time tactical information from across human space, including regions the hegemony had never known existed. Battle damage from recent conflicts, the bulkheads, repaired but deliberately left visible. Everything about the space spoke of a military force actively engaged in large-scale warfare. "Let me make sure I understand correctly," Oran said, his gills fluttering nervously. "Humanity has been fighting in deep space for over a century against threats we've never detected." "That's correct," Admiral replied. "The Void Reapers, the Shadow Fleet, the Entropy Swarm, these are threats that consume entire star systems if left unchecked. Your hegemony exists because we've kept them from reaching this region of the galaxy." Captain activated a holographic display showing the true scope of human military operations. Star systems marked in red indicated active conflict zones. Blue markers showed defensive positions. Green areas represented secure space under human protection. "The hegemony controls approximately 200 star systems," explained. "Our defensive perimeter encompasses over 3,000 systems, including yours." Oran stared at the display in shock. The bubble of space his people considered their entire known galaxy was just a small section of human-defended territory. "Why didn't you reveal this earlier?" he asked. "Why the deception about your technological level?" "Because most species can't handle the truth," replied calmly. "When civilizations learn about the threats in deep space, they either panic and collapse, or they demand we abandon our missions to defend their specific worlds. Neither response helps anyone. We've found it's easier to let species develop naturally within our protective zones," Admiral added. "They build peaceful societies, advance at their own pace, and remain stable. Your hegemony is actually one of our success stories." Oran felt his understanding of galactic politics completely restructuring itself. "Then, why reveal the truth now?" "Because you threatened us," Captain said bluntly. "We can't allow aggressive expansion within our defensive zones. It disrupts the stability we're trying to maintain." "And because the situation is changing," Admiral added grimly. "The threats we face are evolving. We may need allies who understand the real scope of what we're fighting." As if summoned by her words, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Captain immediately activated her command interface. "Report," she ordered. "Captain, we're receiving priority alerts from Deep Space Monitor Station 7, her bridge officer reported through the intercom. "Unknown contacts are approaching from beyond the galactic rim. Massive energy signatures, consistent with Void Reaper Vanguard forces." Expression hardened. "How many?" "Preliminary count suggests a full invasion fleet, ma'am. At least 40 capital ships and supporting vessels." Oran watched in fascination as the humans immediately shifted into combat mode. "No panic," No hesitation, just professional military efficiency responding to a familiar threat. Signal Fleet Command, ordered. Inform them Prometheus is returning to active deployment. Estimated arrival at intercept coordinates in 6 days. She turned back to the conference table where Oran sat in stunned silence. Ambassador, this is what we do, she said simply. This is why we exist. While your people develop art and philosophy and peaceful trade, we fight things that would devour entire civilizations. How long has this been going on? Oran asked weakly. The first Void Reaper contact was in 1847, Admiral replied. A small scout ship that destroyed 3 human colonies before we managed to stop it. We've been preparing for their return ever since. The Shadow Fleet showed up in 1923, Captain added. The Entropy Swarm in 1956. Each enemy taught us new ways to build ships, new weapons, new defensive strategies. The Titan-class Dreadnoughts were developed specifically to fight threats that could consume star systems. Leaned forward. Ambassador, we're willing to reconsider our relationship with the hegemony, but it has to be based on truth, not the fiction you've been living in. What kind of relationship? Oran asked. Partnership, replied. Equal status in matters affecting your territory. In return, you help us maintain stability in this region while we deal with external threats. And if we refuse? Then you go back to your Hegemony Council and tell them what you've learned here, said calmly. But understand that Earth's protection of this region is non-negotiable. Whether you cooperate or not, we'll continue doing what we've always done. Stood, preparing to leave for her ship's bridge. Ambassador, my ship launches in 2 hours to face an invasion fleet that could sterilize 100 worlds. This is what humanity does while other species debate politics. Wait, Oran called out as she headed for the door. How many ships like yours exist? 12 Titan-class Dreadnoughts currently active, replied. Prometheus, Defiant, Indomitable, Vengeance, Guardian, Retribution, Vigilant, Sovereign, Resolute, Eternal, Phoenix, and Undaunted. Each one capable of engaging entire enemy fleets. And you fight alone, no allies. Paused at the doorway. Ambassador, we've never found allies capable of surviving what we face out there. Most species aren't built for the kind of warfare we conduct, but maybe that's changing. She left to prepare her ship for battle, leaving Oran alone with the human leadership. This is a lot to process, he said finally. We understand, replied sympathetically. Take the time you need, but understand that the galaxy is far more dangerous and complex than your people have been allowed to know. 3 hours later, Oran watched from an observation deck as the Prometheus departed for the edge of known space. The massive ship accelerated to impossible velocities, its destination a battle zone that existed beyond his people's understanding of the universe. His diplomatic mission had failed completely. He had come to intimidate a primitive species into submission, and discovered instead that his entire civilization existed under the protection of forces he had never imagined. The journey back to Hegemony space would give him time to prepare his report. He would have to convince the Council that everything they thought they knew was wrong, that humanity wasn't a species to be conquered, but potential allies